Head shops in the city remained open while a federal judge considered the constitutionality of the new law banning the sale of drug paraphernalia in the state. Now that the law has been upheld, one shop owner says he doesn't know whether to close or not. And confusion over what the law says extends to the Oklahoma City police force, too.
The question of the constitutionality of the paraphernalia law has been upheld by the federal court. We are trying to expedite, of course, receipt of that decision, so we can conjointly review that with the municipal counselor's office and make the determination then as to what course of enforcement we will pursue.
Monday says the law could be enforced by spot checks or citizens' complaints. They just don't know how they will handle it yet. Head shop owners may appeal yesterday's decision, but according to one operator, that will depend on how vigorously the law is enforced. Ted Brown, Action 4. Keeping plants in shape is a nursery's business, but that business can't survive without water. And that's what nurserymen are being deprived of with Norman's water rationing plan. Landscapers and nurserymen want an exemption to the plan. They want their customers to be able to water newly installed shrubbery for an extra 8 consecutive days. But the city has rejected that idea, and needless to say, nurserymen think that's unfair.
All the other commercial water users are able to use all the water they need. The city sells water to an oil well drilling rig. They sell all the water that swimming pools need. You go to a racquetball center and they've got water running like crazy in the shower rooms and wasting water running down the drains.
If every customer had their own water well like Greason's Nursery, there'd be no problem. But business is down 85% compared to last year at Twin Oaks, so Greason and others will take their grievances to court on Monday. Ted Brown, Action 4 in Norman.
WB5SJX, WD5DYI.
WD5DYI, WB5SJX. Good morning, Mark.
In today's modern society, many of us feel we're losing our identities. We worry about becoming numbers instead of names. But amateur radio operators don't have that worry. In fact, most ham operators are on a first number basis with their fellow hams. Hams proudly display their call signs on their hats and their backs. Numbers wind up on belt buckles and on flashy nameplates. The government issues radio call numbers in sequential order, and observant hams can tell from the call sign where a person is from and how long they've been in amateur radio. But to the untrained ear, the numbers can be confusing.
They started out W5A and W5AB, W5AC, AAB, or AAA, AAB, AAC. It's confusing. Not only to the general public, it's just a shade confusing to the amateurs.
The government used to require radio operators to change call signs when they moved, but the law has been changed. So now radio buffs can keep their numbers for the rest of their lives. After all, a ham by any other number would not smell as sweet.
Scott Wallace, Action 4, WD5DYI, K5JB clear.
The first hint that this would be a night to remember came about 10:45, when emergency crews responded to reports that the roof had caved in on the Cattlemen's Cafe in South Oklahoma City. A dozen or so patrons and workers shivered in the driving rain while firemen searched the cafe for victims.
Just gave. Everything went in there at once. It all came down.
Was anybody hurt?
Nobody was hurt. Everybody got out. We said run because it's going to come down, and everybody got out. And just about the time everybody got out of the way, and bam, there it went. The whole kitchen's down.
A quick trip to the restaurant roof confirmed suspicions that the weight of the water was just too much for the old building. Meanwhile, flash flooding from the heavy rains was stranding motorists all over the city. One of the worst intersections was Southwest 29th and May. High water trapped the most determined drivers.
I try to make it through here, but I slowed down a little bit too slow. The water's starting to come in through the door now.
Some motorists elected to leave their cars for higher ground. Some shoved their autos out of the intersection. Still others waited for a good Samaritan in a four-wheel drive pickup. Why are you helping people out tonight?
I don't know, because I got in trouble before and people helped me out, so why not help someone else, you know? I mean, I got stranded before and people's helped me, so.
So you're returning the favor?
Sure.
Shortly after midnight, the rain relented, allowing the floodwaters to recede almost as quickly as they had formed. Grateful drivers seized the opportunity to scoot home before the next downpour. Scott Wallace, Action 4, Southwest Oklahoma City.
Last night, the president took to the airwaves to try and convince the American people his tax plan is better than the one being offered by the Democrats. This morning at Republican Party headquarters, hundreds of people were calling in to say they agree with Reagan. The phone started ringing immediately after his speech and continued all day. The Republican workers here will forward the comments to the Republican National Committee in Washington. That is, if they can get through. The phone lines in Washington have been tied up all day, too. And people here say both Republicans and Democrats have been calling.
Immediately after that speech went off, the switchboard lit up for about an hour and a half. And we were to the point of taking 2 or 3 people and putting them on a conference call. We were looking up addresses of the various congressmen and of course, the 2 U.S. senators from Oklahoma. People were wanting to send telegrams and make phone calls, which was surprising. I guess the biggest surprise was that about 70% of our phone calls were from registered Democrats that said they were ready for Reagan's tax plan.
Meantime, the media blitz continues. Local radio stations are giving airtime to both sides of the issue. One is a spot produced by the Republican National Committee.
Telephone your congressman. His vote is necessary to pass the Reagan tax cut. Tell him President Reagan needs his vote because you in America need the Reagan tax cut.
The other is an ad from the AFL-CIO, which links the Reagan tax plan with big cuts in Social Security.
Now he wants to deprive American workers of the protection which they've paid for all their working lives.
Tomorrow, the key vote comes, and then people can see what effect this media blitz and the president's speech last night made on the American public. Bella Shaw, Action 4 in Northwest Oklahoma City.
The Northside wastewater treatment plant is soon to be put out of business, but while in operation, it is producing more sewage sludge than this facility can handle. City engineers say the proposal to put the sludge on land near the zoo was unfeasible. Meanwhile, the sludge pits become more and more full each day. City leaders say they'd now like to haul the sludge to a landfill at Northeast 36 and Mosley, but are waiting for someone to do it at a price the city can afford. Officials can't wait too much longer.
We have to find a solution that is permitted and approved by about 1st of September, or we're going to face some extremely hazardous and perhaps even the mandatory closing down of the plant or curtailing of plant operation. We have started a year ago on this. We've tried to go through the process, and we're now up against the proverbial wall. We can't delay it any further.
Sludge pits like this one at the North Side Sewage Treatment Plant is what City Manager Jim Cook and other city officials are worried about. With heavy rains like the one we just received the other day, eventually this sludge pit will overflow and go into the Deep Fork Creek just behind me. The Deep Fork Creek provides drinking water for several Oklahoma communities. If sludge gets in that water, Oklahoma City could be facing several lawsuits. In other words, Oklahoma City is running out of time to do something about its sludge disposal problems. Ed Stewart, Action 4, Northeast Oklahoma City.
When travelers pull into Norman motels for a good night's sleep, an extra 4% is added to their tab. The levy covers Norman's motel room tax. The tax money is divided up between the local Chamber of Commerce and the city. But some Norman residents are unhappy with the motel room tax. James Timmons spearheaded a push for a grand jury probe into the practice of taxing Norman visitors.
Strictly my views is that the tax is not legal. And I don't think the city has the right to impose such a tax. I think it's unfair. I think it's discriminating, and I think it's a freeloader's tax.
Today, Timmons submitted a petition to the Cleveland County Court Clerk calling for a grand jury investigation into the legality of the motel tax. The petition also asks the grand jury to determine if candidates complied with the city's campaign financial reporting law during the spring elections. The next step is for the election board to determine how many of the petition signees are registered Norman voters. And if at least 500 names are certified, then Chief Judge Alma Wilson will decide when the grand jury can be convened. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Norman.
Well, the investigation as to the circumstances surrounding the crash is still going on. What we know at this time, or what we believe, is that the crash was caused by a mechanical failure of the airplane. Eyewitness reports have indicated that a sputtering noise was heard to be coming from the plane's engine, and it banked hard then and went down.
Tom, are you also investigating the possibility the plane might have been shot down?
This is one of the considerations in the investigation as a whole. We will look into that possibility. I think probably that that's not what happened, but it has been known to occur in these areas before, so we will look at that.
There's a professional loss when you lose a fellow agent, but there's also a personal tragedy there also, isn't there?
I really can't describe it because I've never really gone through this before, but it's a very extremely bad loss to us personally as well as professionally. We have a small agency and we all work together fairly closely, and we know each other quite well, and what we've lost today is not only a fellow law enforcement officer but a very good friend.
Today was cleanup day in the rugged foothills of the Jack Fork Mountains. Yesterday, this single-engine plane crashed, killing all 3 people aboard. Enter Bill Morgan of the State Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs Control, along with McAllister police officers David Sheehan and Ronnie Fox. The 3 men were searching for marijuana crops when the plane went down. The cleanup was exhausting.
They took the plane out piece by piece, and there is no evidence of bullet holes in the plane anywhere.
Al Parker of the Federal Aviation Administration tells what he thinks caused the crash.
Well, investigating the wreckage, at this time, of course, it's evident that the left wing came off of the aircraft in flight. The exact cause of this is yet unknown.
Law enforcement officials say this accident will not hamper their use in using airplanes for investigations. They say, yes, it is tragic, but they are somewhat relieved that no foul play was involved in this accident. Ed Stewart, Action 4, just south of McAllister.
There is a solemn gathering at Will Rogers Airport tonight as family, friends, and fellow priests awaited the return of Father Stanley Rother's body. Rother, an Okarche resident, was shot to death in the rectory of his mission in Guatemala early Tuesday morning. Rother had been a missionary in Guatemala since June 1968. In January, Rother learned that his name was on a Guatemalan death list, but he stayed in Guatemala with the Indians because to him, service was more important than life. Rother was a quiet man. His work was primarily with the Indians in his region of the country. A representative of the American Embassy in Guatemala says the Indians didn't want to release Rother's body this morning. More than 1,000 Indians stood outside the church, praying and waiting. It was as if, the spokesman says, their God had died.
Lord Jesus Christ, humbly, we present the remains of Father Stan Rother to you. We beg you to give him eternal rest without delay. We ask all of this, Lord, in your name and in your power. Amen. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Despite the threats on his life, Rother said he wanted to serve the Indians of Guatemala until his death. Salatka feels perhaps he served them with his death as well. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4.
Debate has raged for more than 5 years over the best way to preserve downtown Edmond. Many downtown merchants are concerned that unscrupulous developers will construct prefabricated buildings in the area if government controls aren't placed on downtown development soon. So they asked the Edmond City Council to appoint a committee to study possible solutions to the problem, and they asked for a 90-day building moratorium for the area while those plans are finished. Most speakers at tonight's council meeting agreed that a plan is needed to preserve the downtown district, but there was some disagreement over whether a 90-day building ban is needed.
I think if this city council imposes a moratorium, that we're intruding into something that, in this particular circumstance, we don't have any business doing.
No one likes a moratorium, but on the other hand, I think there is a justification for this. We are responding to what I see as needs addressed by the people in the area.
In a split vote, the council approved a compromise resolution setting up a downtown study group, but shortening the building ban to 45 days. The building moratorium becomes effective immediately. Scott Wallace, Action 4 in Edmond.
Recreation is a vital part of most of our lives. Federal officials realize this, and that's why federal dollars have been provided to help states and communities develop recreational sites. But this is all going to stop in 1982. The Reagan administration is going to eliminate outdoor recreation funds for states. The money will go toward rehabilitating national parks.
The program that President Reagan has initiated will divert the federal funds that were previously used for state parks and community parks into federal parks.
The director of the Oklahoma Tourism and Recreation Department says the program will cost the state.
we're going to need another $1 million this next year that was previously provided by the federal government that will now have to be provided by state governor if we are to keep up our state parks and continue to satisfy the demand of the Oklahoma citizens.
Hesser says recreation is one of the less expensive ways of deterring crime. He says if youngsters are involved in recreational activity, they're less likely to get into trouble. And that's just one of the reasons he hopes individual states will be able to come up with the necessary money to fund recreational centers across the state as well as communities. Ben McCain, Action 4 at Will Rogers Park.
This looks just like another group outing on the shores of Lake Overholser, but there is tension in the air. This group is made up of Oklahoma City air traffic controllers and their families. The gathering was supposed to let them forget about their troubles, but it's hard not to think about something that so drastically affects the lives of those closest.
Financially, no, we were not prepared for this, but it was not a battle of money. It was a battle of safety, and we decided 3 years ago the job, as it is not worth having. We could have quit then. We decided to fight, and if they get rid of us, at least we fought it till the end, and I pity the poor people that are stuck behind that don't have qualified people to keep the skies safe.
The controllers themselves told us they are being restrained from talking to the media by a court order. Their families, however, can talk, and they seem to think President Reagan will go through with his threats to fire the striking controllers, but they also believe he will be forced eventually to hire them back because, they say, there isn't anyone to replace them. Ted Brown, Action 4 at Lake Overholser.
Pilots flying around Wiley Post Airport haven't had to worry much about the air traffic controller strike. Out of 14 controllers stationed at Wiley Post, only 2 honored the strike and walked off their jobs. But tomorrow, several of the controllers left at Wiley Post may be gone, transferred to Will Rogers World Airport or RAPCON to help lighten their loads.
They have a shortage of people, and we have a, you might say, an overage of people, or more than that we can't spare the people. They would go to a sister facility. One of the reasons, too, is that the controllers at Wiley Post work a lot of traffic, and they are capable of handling a lot of traffic, even at other facilities. So it would be a lot easier to get those people current and qualified in those positions at another facility than it would be to, say, bring a brand new controller on board.
The Wiley Post controllers have been working with a different kind of traffic than they will work at Will Rogers, but they have the experience on which to build, and with other controllers on strike, experience is in short supply. Charles Schnitzer, Action 4 at Wiley Post Airport.
The FAA instructors the government is depending on heavily to train new air traffic controllers are making plans tonight to support fired strikers. The instructors met late this afternoon at a secret location west of Oklahoma City. Our sources tell us the 40 instructors talked about different ways to support fired strikers. It was an emotional meeting because many of the instructors were air traffic controllers before they came to Oklahoma City. All have friends who have been fired. Now, we asked the instructors what happened inside the meeting. No one wanted to go on camera because they were afraid of being fired themselves. But they told us they were very sympathetic towards the strikers. They said they understood better than most why the controllers went on strike. Now, as a result of that meeting today, they say they'll form an informational picket line here at the FAA Academy to show support for fired strikers. Mark O'Neill, Action 4 at the FAA Academy.
Builders, they still follow the old code book, and because of this, I feel this is one reason why there are a lot of chimney fires. But we're finding builders still building chimneys too low, and basically it's because of the code book. There's a lot that needs to be updated, and we feel local building codes can be updated by approaching the state legislators when they're in session and talking with them a little bit. And this will, help save lives.
This plan that Draper pushed through the legislature splits up county lines at will. It also severs communities of interest. It not only severs just communities of interest, but it severs the two major metropolitan areas and splits them up into several different congressional districts. Oklahoma City is split up into 3 different congressional districts, and Tulsa is split up into 2 different congressional districts, and the Supreme Court has said that that should not be done unless it's an absolute necessity. Also, they have drawn this plan up to split many of the minority areas up and put them part of them in one congressional district and part in another congressional district without any showing of need. And so our hope is to keep those areas and those groups intact and all represented by one congressman.